Hello, welcome to Deception and Political Intrigue.
Actually, I'd just like to say I don't even know I am on this panel. Seth? You
Megan?
haven't done anything deceptive.
I've never
have you?
been deceptive in my life.
Yeah, same.
I was going to say, with all of the love in my heart, if you tell me that the answer to our questions is not telling, I will leave the room.
Uh-oh.
I will then come back and continue the panel, but I will leave the room.
I forgot my not telling sock. However, the source of the not telling socks is in this room.
Ooh.
Shame on you.
Incredible. Okay, do you have anything that you would like to lead with? Should I just ask you some questions?
I'll ask questions.
Okay.
What is deception? Tell me.
Yeah. Can we first define our terms?
Sure, great. So we've stuck the two of you together because both of you have written some things that involve either characters engaging in deception, where they are trying to elude or mislead other characters in your works, and also occasionally, upon first reading, the reader...
Did you mean careless? Did you mean careless?
Did I mean
upon careless reading?
Let's say that many of your works have tremendous reread value. Where later you're like, oh my god, they've been plotting the whole time. But the first time it is perhaps not that obvious. Yeah. So you've got characters that are scheming, and occasionally also you as writers appear to be scheming, but I would not know. Okay, so we will have a whole panel later about like formative childhood reading influences. I am curious about influences specifically that you have like read their writing and been like, oh my god, I want to do that specifically. Either of you, do you have things that you can tell us?
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to give the most excruciating answer for Megan, which is that when I was working on my first novel, the first thing I wrote was the ending, which was a short story. And in attempting to write a book leading up to it, I had a friend who was like, you should read Queen of Atolia. You should really read Queen of Atolia. It would help you solve this plot if you read Queen of Atolia. And eventually I did, and I was like, oh yeah, that really helped. And the intrigue and the maneuvers from Queen of Atolia were a big inspiration, although they are executed more ably in Queen than in my book, I think.
I think I might have to disagree.
Well, that's deception.
I'm going to point to Diana Wynne Jones. Her books, specifically Drowned Ammit, I think is the first one that I read, in her Dalemark Quartet. And is it picking up okay? I do not need to hold it all the way up here. Okay, good. And she wrote a series of stories set in a world that looked a lot like the Netherlands, and there was a mythology of that world and immortals in that world, and it felt so real that I assumed she was basing it on a world religion that I was just at that time unfamiliar with. And no, she made up the whole thing. And I don't know how many of you realize it, but she was literally a student of both Lewis and Tolkien. She took their classes. She told very funny stories about the fact that Tolkien wrote on the board and mumbled at it. Clearly in the hopes that if he just didn't look at the class, it would go away. Because the deal at the time was, if nobody showed up for your class, you didn't have to teach it. And Diana's sitting there going, not leaving. Still here. Not going anywhere. And essentially stuck out the entire class with Tolkien. So when she makes up things from whole cloth, she's got some really amazing cloth that she's working with. But when I sat down to write The Thief, I really, really wanted it to feel like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have tools of the trade that either of you use? I have described a little bit of the inside of my head. There are lots of things floating around lots of places. To craft some deception, you have to pin some of the things down and then choose what to reveal or not to reveal. Do you have tools that you use to aid in either the decision making or the laying out of information?
No, but that would be great. Gosh, that sounds so organized and adult and
man.
professional when you describe it that way. Do you have tools?
So my project as a writer, unfortunately, has turned out to be trying to figure out how to live well in the universe. That sounds really inane. Trying to recover the idea of good and evil behavior in the absence of like a higher power to tell us what to do. I always start from the idea that politics is what happens when you have 3 players in a game. And it's why 3-player games are almost always really bad. And politics entails the possibility of cooperation, which is good. We generally like cooperation. But in order to cooperate, both sides have to commit. They say, we'll both do something that hurts us in order to achieve some greater good. And deception occurs when you gain the ability to make a false commitment. To say, yeah, I'll totally help you out if you do the thing that hurts you, and then not do it. And this probably occurred for the first time in some, I don't know, ocean on Earth a very, very long time ago between cells. And a lot of theory has been written by arguably paranoid schizophrenic Cold War mathematicians about how these games were played out. And unfortunately, this body of theory has been poisoned by our current love of competition as the best way to do anything, and by a sort of religious belief that if you deregulate everything, then and let people play without rules, the most efficient solution will emerge, which is clearly not true. So when I go to write Intrigue, I am always thinking about how do you get enough of the reader's trust to make them a false promise, and what do you do if they don't buy your false promise? Like, does the story still work if they see through your deception? Which is a very tricky thing. No, it can't be tricky because I've pulled it off successfully. But in my opinion, you
Hey,
need.
I've pulled it off and it's tricky.
In my opinion,
Let's take credit where credit is due.
All right. I think a good deception story works whether or not you've seen through the twist,
Absolutely agree.
in the same way that a good tragedy works whether or not you know the ending. Arguably better if you know the ending. That's not
Agreed
really
again.
a tool, but that was a long way of describing
Framework is acceptable. Thank you.
No, I also, when I was writing The Thief, was worried over in the sense of kept gnawing on exactly this point that I assumed a lot of people would see through. I thought my remarks on identity were like billboards, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge says that if, for instance, you're trying to sell a car and it's a lemon, no matter how carefully you try to price that car as if it's not a lemon, the fact that you know it is a lemon will affect how you price the car. You can't operate as if you don't know something. And that means that when you get to the end of a book and you find the ending, you immediately think, oh, it was obvious all along and I was just an idiot because I didn't see it. And so if you're the person who knows the ending already, obviously everything seems really obvious. And so I didn't know until I sent the book out into the world whether people would know by page 3. So I had to make sure it was a good book for somebody who does know immediately. Awkward for the people who thought the big secret was that my character was female. But they were just out of luck.
remind me to tell you later off microphone my story about the King of Atolia, because I think that you will think it's very funny.
I can't wait.
Okay. Let's see. Both of you are also writing in series where after a certain point we've met most of the characters. And so the world and the characters operating within it are becoming a little bit more familiar as the readers progress. What do you do to keep it interesting? How do you keep it fresh?
You go first.
So I feel like the story that I wanted to tell in each book demanded changes in viewpoint shift. And by the time I got to the King of Atolia, the viewpoint shift that I wanted to make, you asked earlier about inspiration, the Horatio Hornblower books by E.M. Forster, you have Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, I think he didn't write them in this order, but I certainly read them in this order, where you have this brilliant self-loathing character who just beats himself up all the time and thinks he's his own worst enemy, right? What an idiot. And then you have this book written by Lieutenant Bush, his second in command, who idolizes him and only sees his overwhelming successes. And the whole time you're reading the book, you're like, this man that you idolize hates himself because he thinks he's an idiot. And when I was writing The King of Atolia, I really wanted to have that shift so that you look at my character from the outside, from somebody else's perspective. And that has helped me tell the story that I wanted to tell, but I think it's also kept everybody a little fresher in my head because I'm looking at each character differently with each different book.
Yeah. Also, I would say, without spoiling it, the second book in that series very effectively sends the reader a signal that the characters and the stakes have changed right at the beginning. One of the
Seth Dickinson, master of understatement.
One of the more effective ones that I've read. It's kind of showing the instruments if you're into medieval torture.
I was thinking about Jason in The Good Place, who says whenever he has a problem, he just throws a Molotov cocktail at it, and then he has a different problem.
Yes. So I would say I took a very similar approach to you in my second book, which is a very, very tough book to write. And the second book turned into the second and third book because it got so long. And the reason for that was entirely that I thought the first book was too trapped in one character's perspective and too sterile because that character was so monomaniacally focused on her own thing. Like part of her weakness was a lack of understanding of what others were up to. So I wanted to show the character from other people's perspective. The cost here is when you have more than one POV, you spend a lot of word counts setting up each character in their own perspective and what they've got going on. So, I'm like 4 or 3 years late on the last book in this series. And part of the issue has been that it's just impossible for me at my current skill level to wrap up all of these characters' stories in their own perspectives in a reasonably sized book. Like if we write like Shogun and it's 300,000 words, okay. Another great example of an intrigue book with lots of perspectives. But I think after doing books 2 and 3 with a lot of different perspectives, for the fourth book, I'm going to have to go back to that single internal perspective from Baru, because I can't manage the structure and word count with everybody getting their turn in the limelight.
I had a similar problem with the Return of the Thief.
Yeah.
That it was going to be 1,100 pages long.
Yes.
And that people might think they want to read that, but nobody actually does enjoy reading that. It's one of those things when, be careful what you wish for, and then because you don't like it when you find it. And yeah, I got some very good advice from my agent about that, sort of along the same lines of you can do anything you want, But you can't do everything you want. Yeah.
I would like to point out the number of faces who, as you were like, nobody would want to read that, and we're like, I would.
No, you wouldn't.
Just so you know, those faces are there.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too political with it, but larger books are physically more expensive to print and put on bookshelves.
What?
And your ability to keep your editor happy is, I mean, at least at my publisher, the editor is responsible for the profit and loss of the books they represent. If you're giving them huge books that do not sell, you are creating a problem for yourself and for your editor. We would all love to write the infinitely unpacking fractal version of our novels where every character has a perspective, but
No, we wouldn't.
there are practical reasons it's a bad idea.
Also, madness lies that way. Yeah. I don't even remember what the question was at this point. So,
No, that's
you know,
okay.
it's a
It
great
was
panel.
great. I know. I'm already like, this was the best choice. Thank you both. I had a more formalized question, and it has kind of devolved between the beginning of this panel and now to be, tell me about unreliable narrators and writing them.
So there are two different kinds. Oh, there's more than two. But I think we would agree that one kind of narrator always tells you the truth, but is careful to frame it or to leave things out such that when you have added context for the true statements, they mean something completely different than you thought. And a lot of times you can trust readers to trick themselves, because if you're doing a good job, the reader is in trance. They're accepting the information they're given and carrying on with the story in kind of a psychological flow state.
I call this the power of conventional thinking.
And then there's the actively unreliable narrator who just tells you things that aren't true. I don't know if I've ever written one of those. It sounds harder.
I can't even think. Can you think an example? Because no, I don't think I've written one of those either.
Patrick Bateman from American Psycho.
Okay.
Very unclear if he ever murders anyone, or if you literally look up the clothes he describes people as wearing, it's like completely insane. Nobody would ever wear these things. So he may just be constantly delusional.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't actually think your second type was going to be tells the truth but conceals things and then tells things that may or may not actually be true. The other thing that I was thinking is fully convinced that they are telling the whole truth.
Oh,
but
and
then
is
with
totally
additional
wrong. I mean-
information, the further context there is what makes you go, "Ooh, are you sure though?"
Okay. I'd be willing to add 3 categories there. The person who is telling you the truth but leaving things out
On
in a
purpose,
misleading way.
right.
The person who is deliberately misinforming you, sort of. And then the person who thinks they're telling you the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
And-
once you have more context, the truthfulness gets murkier, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I want to say more about the power of conventional thinking. And I said earlier I wasn't sure whether people were going to recognize the identity of my character early on in the story. But in fact, I underestimated how powerful just conventional thinking is. It's like in my book, within like the first chapter, I have mentioned window glass, compasses, and cannon on the ship, right? Literally before my main characters leave the city. The number of people who think that this is an early medieval society is really high. This has to be like in the early 900s or something. And it's like, when did you think they made window glass? It's a gunpowder society. Why are you so surprised that there's going to be guns later? And it's because it's got magic in it. It's a fantasy novel. By golly, those don't happen with pre-industrial technology. And in the same way, who wakes up in the morning and recaps their entire life, right, before they get out of bed? And yet, first-person narratives very conventionally open with the main character introducing you to everything that it's important in their life. And I just thought, what if they didn't do that? How much would you understand about who they are if you took out what's really silly? It's a silly convention. What if you just skipped the silly convention? What would you have left? And that's where I started my entirely non-deceptive storytelling. Nobody ever thinks, I am Megan Whalen Turner. I hope nobody ever thinks I am Megan Whalen Turner when they wake up in the morning, because I sure don't. Yeah.
So I guess we can slot the narrators and the authors into those three categories.
Let's see. We already talked about other media. We already talked about tools of the trade.
Well, we've run out of things to talk about already. Okay,
We
I'm
have
going
not.
home.
I will add to the
Like, say more.
a weird subcategory we in some ways have both had to work with, but they're different, is the wounded character. The character who's unwilling or unable to acknowledge certain things due to a often physical trauma, could be emotional. You see this used as a device a lot in the most common form of this I see is the character talks to someone who's revealed to have not existed or been dead the whole time. I don't think either of us has used those exactly. But I have a character as hemi-neglect, which is inability to pay attention to anything on one side of the body. And it is very hard to tell the reader that the character is not aware of something. Because kind of the only way you can remind them is that the character will be surprised by something that they missed. It's very tricky to create that when you're in a tight third-person or first-person perspective where you're narrating what the character knows. It's very hard to tell the reader, hey, there's something over here the character doesn't know, but you should know. Requires some footwork.
Okay. Do you have anything else that has come up as we have talked?
In terms of deceit, nah.
Well, I mean, I can talk forever about this stuff. Are you just throwing us the ball? Like
Yes, I
seals?
would love to throw you the ball for a little bit. In about 10 minutes, I will take it back and hand it to the attendees.
Ooh, okay.
One kind of deception I'm really interested in is honest signaling, which is, in nature, techniques designed to hurt your opponent's ability to harm you based only on true information. So Gazelle, I think, or Springboks or something. Oftentimes when they see a predator stalking them, they will stand in place and do something called pronking, where they just jump up and down as high as they can. And this is obviously not a great way to get away from a lion or cheetah that is chasing you. But what it does do is say, hey, I'm in pretty good shape. I can jump really high. It's a waste of your time to chase me because it'll be really, really exasperating and it'll go a really long time. You should just go kill someone else. And this seems to work pretty well. Similarly, like aposematic coloring, maybe it's not aposematic if it's honest, but many animals advertise that they're venomous or poisonous on the theory that predators will be like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't eat that. And maybe the most human version of this is if you're in a confrontation, throwing the steering wheel out the window. This is a famous way to win games of chicken with cars. You know, the game of chicken is you drive your cars at each other. The first one to break off loses. So if you just tear your steering wheel off and throw it out the window, you're signaling.
I do that all the time.
I am unable to break off. I've overcommitted to this, and you have no choice but to either kill us both or give up. So these kind of like honest bluffing techniques are really fascinating to me. Especially because, sorry, I'll shut up in a second.
No.
there's
Go on. No, seriously. And I want to talk about game theory, but this isn't a game theory panel. So,
we're getting there though. You always have to be suspicious of arguments about how morality evolved, because many of the people making the arguments are shitheads. But there's this concept called greenbeard altruism, which is how do we make altruistic things evolve when evolution rewards selfishness? Well, you only help out, you're only altruistic to other people with green beards or, I don't know, green hair. Because this is a signal that I'm the kind of person who helps. You don't want to help unhelpful people because you're wasting your time. So you evolve some kind of honest signal that says, hey, I have a real green beard and not a fake one. You have to worry about fake green beards. So what you do is you come up with a signal that's really costly. And I've read arguments, I don't know if I buy them, but from anthropologists, that stuff like skull shaping, where you raise babies with like bands around their heads so they come up with weirdly shaped skulls, or circumcision is a way of costly signaling that you belong to a group that's hard to fake, so that you want to help out other people with your skull shape because you're members of the same society, and it's very, very hard for someone to outside to come in and be like, I too have a cone-shaped skull.
Okay, so we're now living in an era where it's very hard to know what things are true, with the deceptivity in videos and blogs and misinformation. Oh my God, are we all going to have cone-shaped heads? It is suddenly making me think about costly verification processes where, maybe we'll all end up with very elaborate and very specific tattoos that are hard to change, or skull-shaped heads, or, I don't know, carrying around identification equipment. Gee, thanks for that image. So, obviously you've done a lot of reading. How does your research influence your writing? And do you decide what you're going to write and then go read Dirk? Gosh, I just spaced on a name. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you let the course of the book dictate your reading, or do you find that you just have that reading in the back of your head and move stories in directions in line with your reading?
I am unable to generate the discipline and executive function to outline a story, go read the things that will make it better, and then write it. So what I do instead is just read stuff, and there's some kind of compost heap.
Yes.
And the ideas go in there and sort of bubble, and then occasionally they burst and spatter things into my consciousness.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a better word for that. And I'm going to give you the one that somebody gave me a couple weeks ago. I was at a conference for my husband, who is a cognitive scientist, and I meet a lot of other cognitive scientists through him, and they're friends. And every once in a while, I appear in cognitive science talks, sort of unexpectedly, and that happened.
Are you the Peter Morwood of cognitive science talk?
Well, I could. Good point. So I was at the International Cognitive Linguistics Society conference a couple of weeks ago, and a woman named Renata Gelt, who's a professor in Croatia, was talking about an enabling space. So your cognition can be sort of scaffolded by an enabling space. And you acquire things to build that scaffolding. So it's not exactly like a compost heap. It is much more like an assortment of things that support each other, right? And she says, Megan Whalen Turner, for example, and I'm like, oh my God, Renata. Megan Whalen Turner is known for going places and saying, what's that tree? Do you know what kind of bird that is? Ooh, look at the way the pavement here is all, and I'm like, Renata, please. And she explains that while that might seem random, these are all bits of information that go into the scaffolding that I will eventually draw on when I am world building or describing a psychological event or all sorts of things, it's a really important part of my creative process that I am constantly filling an enabling space with information. So in my case, it's always a little bit of both. I realize I'm writing a story and I want to know how you tin copper. And then I have to go off and figure out how to tin copper. And then I know more than anyone ever wants to know about tinning copper. And then I spend a lot of time cutting out the too much information about copper that I have put into my book. So in some sense, I do research after the fact. But a lot of my acquisition is front-loaded before I'm ever writing anything. So how did you start with all the game theory stuff?
So my background is actually in social psych.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember if there's a more interesting way I got into it, though. Like, the way I got into Diane Duane was...
That's a better question.
My parents had a shelf of old Star Trek paperbacks, and she'd written one of them,
Yay.
which I loved. I think she wrote one with Peter. And I'm trying to remember if I got interested in game theory the same way. I'm going to back into it by saying I also really like something from cognitive psych, which is the concept of prototypes and semantic networks. So the idea is that the human brain doesn't really categorize things with rules. Like, if you try to define what a dog is, it's impossible to come up with a rigorous rule set that will never have any exceptions and identify a dog.
And yet, you put an 18-month-old in front of a wolf, and it says, doggy.
Yes, and if you ask people which is more dog-like, this wolf, this, what are the really nice black and white ones?
Zebra?
Okay, we'll use zebra actually. This zebra, this wolf, or this border collie. People can pretty reliably rate which one is the most dog-like and which one is the least. And it's because we have this prototype in our head of what a dog is, which is just generated from all the things we've seen called a dog in the past, mixed together, averaged out. And your brain just, rather than caring about rules or logic, it just weights how often ideas appear together in your experience and draws connections between them that get stronger the more they co-occur. This is really nice. It's a super convenient way to train a brain to do stuff. And it's a lot cheaper than writing explicit machine code, like define dog.
Trying very hard not to give you a lecture on metaphors now.
Well, what I was going to say is that we can use this as writers to deceive the audience, sometimes in honest ways, sometimes in dishonest ways. Because a lot of how you experience a story is not logical. Really silly example. If I described, if I'm trying to, so one really cheap way writers do this all the time is they make characters ugly if they want you to not like them. You know, they'll describe their like reptilian smile or their beady eyes. And one of my favorite Diana Wynne Jones books, I think, has an arc where a character is introduced as seeming really unpleasant to our protagonist, and then over the course of the book he warms to her, and kind of the adjectives used to describe her change. But you know, if I wanted to hint that, like, I want to sell to you that someone is rich, I can describe their house as cream colored instead of yellow or white or off-white, because cream sounds like a richer word. It has these associations with like thickness, luxury, taste, and it's not actually giving you any different information, but the semantic links between that word help prime you. It's called priming, to think of this character as someone upper crust, you know, the cream of society. It's good tricks, I think.
So I really am trying to avoid the lecture on metaphor, but we can do that another time. So
for a lightning talk.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can sign up for a lightning talk.
But I saw, speaking of honesty and self-representation, one of the hardest things to do, I find, is brag about yourself. I'm not good at this.
Please do.
But it's part of your job. you're sending your work out to an editor or to a new agent or something, and you want to say, "Hi, I'm Megan Whalen Turner, and I'm fabulous." And by the way, and I saw on Tumblr there is some literati cat who is an agent, and she coaches people and she responds to asks about agenty things. And somebody wrote to her and said, my prose is lush and lyrical, and how do I say that in a letter to an editor? My peeps tell me that I sound unpleasantly like I'm bragging. If I say, for instance, my book is lush and lyrical like Laini Taylor. And you're like, you're right. If you walk into somebody saying, I write like Laini Taylor, it's not a good look. And she coached the blog owner, whose name totally escapes me right now, coached her to say, no, what you say is, my book would be perfect for fans who love the lush, lyrical writing of Laini Taylor. So you just said exactly the same thing without bragging about yourself. And it's these really very subtle differences that can completely screw with your audience. It's great.
If you ever want to pretend to be 20-something and someone asks you your age, you can just say, I'm closer to 30 than 20. And everyone will assume you're between 30 and 20.
I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased. Yeah, they were like, okay. So we have about 10 minutes before it is time for lunch. We have time for a few questions. If anybody has any burning questions, bear in mind that there will be a panel later this weekend where you will be given a chance in advance to write some questions for all of our guests. So do not feel that you need to get every single question that you ever had for these two lovely humans off your chest right this moment.
We're here all weekend.
Yes, that's also true.
Talk at all about fair play, which I think is important in talking about deception.
I am also happy
bring that
to
up
just
later.
let you keep talking
No,
for 10
let's
minutes.
do questions.
I won't stop you. Okay, so I will ferry the microphone around, and we will give you a few more minutes to answer questions from the audience.
Okey-dokey.
Fabulous. Shut me off in like 10 minutes. Thank you.
Could you please talk about fair play?
I think just to keep it really short, so we don't eat up question time, readers can get very angry if you reveal something to them that they don't think they were prepared to know. Whereas, ideally, you want the reader to say, oh, of course, why didn't I see it? Or, in some situations, you want the reader to figure it out about 5 pages before the explicit reveal, so they get to feel smart, but not too smart.
I think that there are 2 different ways to do a twist ending, and one of them is, with a murder mystery, you know that you're trying to solve the whole thing, and you have this expectation that you're being given the clues that you now need in order to understand 5 pages before the reveal. But another really common form of a twist ending is, I have given you 17 little dominoes in a row. I will now give you the 18th domino, and it falls backward, and it changes everything that you thought you knew about the previous 17 dominoes. And if people think that they're reading one story and they're reading the other one, yes, they can get very cranky. Yes. Okay, that was fair play for me.
I'm sorry, there are pillars.
I love the arm sticking out from behind the pillar. Yeah.
So in my work, I have to distinguish between lying because someone wants you to believe an untrue thing, honesty because they want you to believe a true thing, and what at my work we call bullshit, which is indifferent to truth or lying because it's after some other goal, right? I don't care whether what I'm telling you is true or false. I care whether something else happens. Do you think in those terms about characters interacting with each other and with the reader, or is really deception always around some authorial truth that?
You first.
I off the top of my head, think it is very hard to bullshit in a book, unless you're specifically writing about someone who's a total bullshitter, because readers expect that all the information you're giving them is useful in some way, even if it's just to characterize someone. If you're trying to characterize someone as a bullshitter, you could probably do that, but I don't think you could spend non-dialogue narrative space on bullshit without the reader thinking you're wasting their time. I'm not sure.
I think you have to define bullshit. Because there's a thing that I've heard a number of times and that I really find counterproductive. And that is that YA books are just like adult books but without the bullshit. And this is in an effort to say that YA books have validity as works of art and intellectual activity and onward. And that they're just as good as adult books. And I really disagree with that characterization because of the bullshit part. Because what you consider bullshit when you're 14 is actually really great to read when you're, working your way through War and Peace in your 30s. It's not bullshit. It certainly might appear as bullshit to somebody who just wants the story. But I find that when you're doing pacing for a book, you can't just go bang, 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 or even if it's all like really exciting, it just gets wearying after a while. So you need to do this with your pacing sometimes, and what you do is you spend 2 paragraphs or 2 pages describing a water course and erosion in the middle of your spicy narrative about almost anything. And it's because you're slowing down the person's expectations, and then you're going to ramp their excitement level back up. Okay, is that bullshit? Because that's exactly what those people trying to praise YA books are trying to get rid of. They think that's all the stuff you should just cut out, and then you have a really good YA book. And obviously I disagree with that too. But there is a description, a use of the word bullshit right there to describe the narrative flim-flammery of occasionally distracting your reader with some really boring paragraphs about erosion in the mountains. So that's might not be the answer to the question you asked, but there you have it.
Yeah, there is a hand right here, and of course,
Behind the
we
post?
timed it well.
Hi. Going back to what you were saying about the twist endings and sorry, I'm distracted by a toddler. But the question is, how do you manage clues that you give throughout the story to not give it away to the reader too early, or make it so that they never saw it coming? How do you manage the clues that they're like well timed and everything?
I think it looks like this.
Wait, what does that mean?
It means I spend a lot of time staring at the floor. Also walking back and forth. Wringing my hands often helps. I think you just have to give it your best shot. And in my case, I leave the book aside for a significant length of time before I go back and reread and try to get a slightly fresher look at it. And then you have to submit it to a couple of readers. And then you have to decide if you agree with whatever they say. Because sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're like, okay, 3 out of 5 people got it. I'm going to go with that. And the 2 out of 5 people are just not going to be happy. But I don't think you ever really know that you... How confident were you of your levels of deception? I mean, both of us are trying to write a good book, even if we don't pull off the deception. So I would say that indicates a not perfect sense of confidence in our ability to pull it off with every reader. So, but overall, how confident were you?
I did not worry about whether I would pull off the deception. I aimed to write a book that would still be good if you'd read the ending first. And I've been pleasantly surprised that there's like a good spectrum of readers, or about half are like, oh, I sort of saw it coming and sort of didn't. Some are like, it was completely obvious from the very beginning. I can't believe this author thought he could get away with it. And then another cluster who are like, this was not set up at all. It came out of nowhere.
Yeah, same.
So I wouldn't say I had a lot of confidence in my ability to do anything at the front.
Do you see those reviews changing over time? Because, The Thief got a Newbery Honor Book Award, right?
Right.
Okay, this is back in a day when it's only reviewed by professionals who are reviewing for libraries and teachers, right? They don't care about spoilers. The whole point of the review is to say, the dog dies in this book, and also in this one there's sex, so maybe don't put it in the third grade shelf. And, spoilers are fine in these reviews. They didn't spoil my book. A whole year of professional reviews of The Thief. Nobody blew the ending. So all of those librarians on the committee came to it with the conventional thinking that says, I'm a grown-up, this is a children's book, it can't possibly surprise me. And I think that really accounts for why I got that award. Once you tell people, oh, twist ending, that's all you need to say. You have just made their reading experience completely different. So as the book gets older, do you see more people saying, oh my God, it was so obvious? How could anybody miss this? Because as it does sort of percolate through that there is a twist ending in the book, I find more people think that what they read, the signaling was so obvious anybody should have gotten it. But again, it's a curse of knowledge. Once you know there's something to watch out for in Baru, then you come to Baru very differently. And you notice a couple of little hints there earlier on.
I cannot rigorously answer whether I've seen a change. I would have to go like...
You'd have to go read all those reviews. Don't do that.
Yeah. I will say directly to your question, person behind the column, that
Arm
you
behind
can...
the column?
What I think mystery writers do a lot is you can hide a ton of key information in places the reader is not primed to be looking for it. Like a side character expresses frustration that they had trouble parking. And later this comes up to be a major clue. Like, oh, there's never any parking at this place in this spot, so the alibi doesn't hold up. Just to make up a complete nonsense example. But burying the clues in places where the reader does not think important information will be, where they're just kind of conventional thinking, reading along like, oh, this is the bullshit used to pace out the story. I'm not going to get any good clues here. And then later they'll go back and be like, you did say that. You did tell me that. I just didn't think it mattered. Which is often also how the characters in the story act. They're like, we're missing something that's going to blow the whole case open. And then they figure it out at some point in Act 3. We had one up front?
We are actually out of time.
But we could fit one more in.
I want to make sure that you both eat and then come back for the panel that everybody is on in 1 hour. And also that you all have time to eat and come back to the panel that everybody is on in an hour.
Tell us the question.
I'm not telling. Thank you.
I'm saving that for 20 years. How do you like these?
Incredible. This has been a wonderful panel. Thank you both so much for coming. Thank you all for your questions and your energy, and everybody. This was great. Thank you so much.